family. Cora was on her side with her torso turned towards the floor. He removed the bands and begged them to breathe. He continued to scream uncontrollably and screamed for officers to come to the basement. The dispatchers are hearing this and they send help down to the basement. And when they encounter Patrick, he yells out, "She killed the kids."
We're learning more gruesome details about the murders of 3 young Massachusetts children as their mother, Lindsay Clancy, is charged in their deaths. In Clancy's first court appearance since the murders, she appeared virtually from her hospital bed.
On Friday, January 27, 2023, using an erasable whiteboard because she was still temporarily intubated, one of the first questions that Lindsay Clancy asked was, "Do I need an attorney?" She knew that she had murdered her children, and she had the clarity, focus, and mental acumen to focus on protecting her own rights and interests.
Prosecutors outlined the events that led up to the murders on January 24th, alleging Lindsay Clancy meticulously planned the deaths of 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan before attempting her own suicide by jumping out of a second-story window.
On the morning of Tuesday, January 24th, 2023, the defendant took her 5-year-old daughter, Cora, to the pediatrician's for an appointment. She interacted with a receptionist, nursing staff, and a doctor. There were apparently no issues with the defendant's demeanor or behavior as she completed the appointment and was allowed to leave with Cora without any issues or concerns. When she returned home, she went outside with Cora and her 3-year-old son, Dawson, to play in the snow. They built a snowman. The defendant sent photos to her mother and to the defendant, to her husband. She texted with them. Nothing in the text was out of the ordinary or any sign of any distress or trouble.
After that, prosecutors say Lindsay Clancy searched for the 3V restaurant in Plymouth, about 25 minutes from her home in Duxbury.
She then searched at Takeout 3V via her cell phone at 4:13 p.m. Immediately after doing that, she used Apple Maps on her phone to determine how long it would take someone to drive from her home in Duxbury to 3V restaurant in Plymouth. So she would know how long someone would be gone if they ran that errand.
It was then that Clancy texted her husband, Patrick Clancy, asking for takeout.
At 4:53 p.m., the defendant texted her husband, who was working in his home office in their basement. She texted, "Any chance you want to do takeout from 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." This was an unusual request, as when the family ordered takeout, they'd usually go somewhere closer to home, but it was a place that they had been in the past. Patrick Clancy texted back yes, and then the defendant asked him to check the menu.
Minutes later, Patrick Clancy left the family home.
At 5:15 p.m., Patrick Clancy headed out the door to run these errands at the defendant's request. As he left, she texted him Pedialex liquid stool softener. Surveillance footage shows Mr. Clancy at CVS on Summer Street in Kingston at 5:32 p.m. He goes to the medication aisle, the children's medication aisle. Phone records show that he called the defendant at 5:33 p.m. and she did not answer the phone. He then calls him back at 5:34 p.m. and the call lasted 14 seconds. He's there at the store unsure of which medication to get, and she tells him exactly what she wants. He had no issues communicating with her. It was a completely normal call, although he did mention that she seemed like she was in the middle of something.
When Patrick Clancy returned home, he found a tragic scene.
When he arrived home, the first thing he noticed was the silence. He did not see or hear the defendant or the children. He actually called her cell phone at 6:09 p.m. looking for them, and she did not answer. He went to their bedroom on the second floor and the door was locked. He was able to open it, and when he looked inside, he saw blood on the floor in front of a full-length mirror and the window open. He immediately runs downstairs and into the backyard, where he finds the defendant laying on the ground. She appeared to have cuts on her wrists and neck, but he stated to 911 that those wounds were no longer bleeding. She was conscious. He called 911. During this time, he asked the defendant, "What did you do?" She responded to him, "I tried to kill myself and jumped out the window." During the 911 call, Patrick can be heard asking the defendant, "Where are the kids?" He later told police that she replied, "In the basement." So immediately after this happened, she knew what she had done and she knew where the kids were. When EMS arrived, he asked them to stay with her so he could go find his kids. The 911 call kept going. Patrick can be heard on the 911 call entering the home and heading to the basement. At one point, he calls out, "Guys." He can then be heard screaming in agony and shock as he found his children. His screams seem to get louder and more agonized as the time passes.
Prosecutors say the 3 Clancy children were found with exercise bands around their necks.
Cora and Callan were on the floor in the den area of the finished basement, which is to the left when you walk down the stairs, while Dawson was alone on the floor in his father's home office, which is to the right when you go down the stairs. Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks when their father found them. Dawson and Callan were face down on the floor. Cora was on her side with her torso turned towards the floor. He removed the bands and begged them to breathe. He continued to scream uncontrollably and screamed for officers to come to the basement. The dispatchers are hearing this and they send help down to the basement. And when they encounter Patrick, he yells out, "She killed the kids."
Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead at the hospital the same day. Baby Callan was rushed to Boston Children's Hospital but died 3 days later. Ahead of their deaths, prosecutors say Clancy spent time in the hospital for mental health issues, but was being treated for her symptoms. She even told her husband she was improving.
According to her husband, she was never on more than 4 to 5 medications at one time. And at the time of the murder, she was taking only 3 medications. And he said to the police that she always took the medications as prescribed.